Awesome. Hello, everyone. This is the JBH show, also known as the Just Another Bloke with a podcast. And I have with me today former soldier, current candidate for election, current councillor, skydive instructor, I think you mentioned, Paul Barker with me today. So welcome, Paul. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about all of the things that you do.
Jeez. If we go all the way back,
Yeah.
it started when I was in high school delivering junk mail.
Yep. Are you one of those?
I was one of those.
That's all right. I don't hold that against you.
So this is before the age of folding machines. So we get all the leaflets, fold them all up, chuck them in the bag, walk around, go delivering flyers, and role reversal. That was at about 14 years of age. So we are nearly 30 years later doing the same.
And were you local? You grew up around here, or?
I grew up in Adelaide and Melbourne.
Yeah. All right, cool. When did you move to Surf Coast?
I moved to Surf Coast around 2017 to be a full-time skydive instructor. I was commuting from Melbourne to Torquay to be a part-time skydive instructor on weekends. Full-time job come up. So I moved down, did that for a couple of years, then got poached by St Kilda, so then commuted from Torquay to St Kilda for a couple of years.
So how do you fall into that role? That's didn't even intend to do that.
With extra cheese.
That's brilliant. How do you find a role like that? When did that's obviously not something that you graduate school thinking that you're going to do.
Never. When I was in the Air Force, when I passed my weapon instructor course, as a gift to myself for congratulations, I paid for a skydive, learned to skydive, chuck parachute on your back, jump out, 2 instructors holding on, open parachute, and they instruct you how to land.
Yep.
Seed was planted. I then got into racing motorcycles. That was rather expensive. But then life evolves, life changes.
Yeah, it's cheaper to throw yourself out of a plane.
Way cheaper.
Yeah. Okay. And the want to do that, where does that come from?
I've learnt that some people call it adrenaline seeking.
Yeah.
I've since learnt it's called high sense seeking.
Right.
And it seems that I am that. I am at my most calm, approaching 250 kilometres an hour on Phillip Island Main Strait.
Yeah, right.
That is zen for me.
Okay, so good under pressure.
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah. So, you got me thinking about basketball now.
Yeah.
I generally shoot three-pointers better when I've got someone in my face than when I've got clear sky, no one in front of me.
Right. There you go. Okay. So you were leaflet dropping in Adelaide.
Yes.
You moved across to Melbourne.
For trucking.
Well, so you're also a truck driver.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So I've done about 2 million kilometres around Australian trucks.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you've seen a fair bit of the country then?
Some excellent sights.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's your favourite?
Sunsets over the hay plains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, whereabouts is that?
Middle south, New South Wales.
Okay, yeah. Nice. So, okay, you've been a truck driver, skydive instructor, leaflet dropper, you served in the military. We were talking a little bit about that outside.
Yeah.
What was your experience like in the military? When did that fit into your life?
High school, I want to be a fighter pilot.
Yep.
Top Gun, super influential.
Yep.
Failed English, good in maths, physics, chem, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Went to Defence Force recruiting. They're like, how about this? Airfield defence. Basically like infantrymen in the army, except in the Air Force.
Yeah.
Because decades and decades ago, there's been issues with defending Air Force assets, and Army used to do that. And then they're like, nah, we got something better to do. Yeah. And then Air Force is like, what? So aerodrome defence guards were born, and they actually had a bit of time in the airbase in Malala, which then got converted to a racetrack, which I then raced on in my
full
early days. Yeah.
Nice. So where did the Army go? What were they rejigged to do?
It's just all different. It's historical stuff, but it just means that now, well, since the aerodrome defence guards were raised, that then evolved into airfield defence guards, that then evolved into another name they've got now. They've changed since I left. It just gives Air Force that ability to provide their own defence.
Yeah. So the Air Force has their own army.
Yes.
It's like the 3 largest air forces in the world are like the US Army, the US Navy, and the US Marines or something like that. And then the US Air Force is actually fourth. Like, I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but it's like they've each got their own subset. So I guess the Australians just trying to copy that, I guess. Does the Army have its own Air Force?
The Army's got rotary.
Yeah, right.
Air Force doesn't have rotary wing.
Yep.
Where Air Force has got all the fixed wing.
Which makes sense. You know, you'd think Air Force would be all flying objects, but that's okay. That's okay. So you're obviously the Libertarian candidate for Corangamite.
Yes.
How does a Libertarian fare in the military structure? Did you find it difficult to...
I was not Libertarian when I was in the military.
Okay. Did the military help you develop your Libertarian ideology, or is this why?
Observation.
Yeah.
So because I wasn't a Libertarian when I was in the military, I was exposed to a whole range of different environments that now with that lens of libertarianism, I've then been able to think back to all those experiences, most of them phenomenal, but there's a lot of waste.
Yeah.
So the way things were structured, you'd end up on yippee shoots or something like that. So the unit had an allocation of ammunition. If they weren't able to use that ammunition in that financial year, the next year, they get cut down.
Yeah, right.
So there's no incentive for the military to operate on a lean basis.
So it would, instead of carrying over, it would be just you're allocated less. Yeah, right. Interesting.
Yes.
What else?
A lot of the mental health aspects.
Yeah.
They're slowly improving. There's the Veteran Royal Commission that's just come out and over 100 recommendations that I don't think governments are going to implement. But the reality is that in order to have a strong defence force, you do need to break people down and build them up into a soldier or airman, sailor, whatever the situation is.
Yeah.
But there needs to be better methods to reintegrate people back into society. So I left the full-time Air Force in 2007.
Yep.
Did a couple of years part-time. I still struggle to interact with what I am a civilian.
Yeah.
But there's that difference in trust. So going from an environment where you can trust someone to shoot bullets over your head while you're both approaching a target versus now where I'm not sure if some people I engage with, whether they're going to steal out of my back pocket.
Yeah.
So that transition is very difficult to
There's
manage.
a lack of trust in civilian society.
Massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we need to improve that.
100%. Do you think that, what are the flaws in the system from your perspective when it comes to the mental health of veterans? I know this is something that you're passionate about.
Yes. So I think it's getting better now. Having not left recently, I can't speak to the processes for what's occurring now.
Yeah. But you're still involved in the RSL and stuff.
Yeah. So
you're aware of it.
Yeah. So I'm president of the local RSL.
Yeah.
And seeing some of the challenges that veterans who've been out longer than me still have.
Yeah.
There's this ongoing issue where Australia takes people off the street, trains them up to fight an enemy.
Yep.
And then they leave. And a lot still have this, I don't want to say attacking, but they're okay in conflict. So what it results in is a lot of internal fighting within the organisation. And whether it's a RSL Vic State conference or a little sub-branch or something, there's a lot of people that do work well together, but there's also some that still fight. And
I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying that it's called like a hostility awareness thing, and when they step out of it, they can't disconnect that. And so when they are just in civilian life, they do really struggle because they are constantly alert still.
Oh, that hypervigilance.
Yeah.
I don't think that goes, depending on what role you're in, that hypervigilance I think is an excellent thing, but it's like running on afterburner all the time, and you just can't do that sustainably.
No, you burn out.
Yeah.
Okay. And so further to, where do you think the actual flaws are? Where's the gap? Is there
the reintegration?
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm fine with generally what occurs throughout military service.
Yep.
I don't like the expeditionary nature where we're projecting ourselves onto others.
Yep.
But if you look at the micro, the individual impact, I think there's a lot of ways to go to improve the reintegration back into civilian society.
Yep. And what do you think would be, what would your ideal look like? Are you aware of a thing that the government could do differently, or that we as citizens would do differently?
There's over 100 recommendations in the Veteran Royal Commission that anyone's welcome to go on the website and check them out and check them out for themselves.
Sure. Okay. So you talked about not wanting to project our forces. That obviously comes into the libertarian ideology a little bit. Talk to us about your experience with the libertarians. Is like, what's it all about?
In a nutshell?
In a nutshell. Talk about
we want
ideology,
to make,
and then talk about the party, because they're not always the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in broad terms, it's for liberty, free markets, free speech, limited government.
Yep.
At a tangible level, we seek to change the government so it stops taking your stuff and stops telling you what to do.
Okay. And how long have you been involved with the libertarian?
Since 2014, 15, thereabouts.
Yep.
My introduction to politics was Julian Assange.
Yep.
So while I was in the Air Force Reserve, I remember handing, you do a bit of paperwork at the start of the year for induction, just getting everything sorted. Are you a member of a political party at WikiLeaks? I remember handing that to my commanding officer, and an eyebrow was raised.
Yeah, right. So there was a WikiLeaks party.
Yes, so that was my introduction. So the aim was to get Julian Assange elected as a senator in Victoria. It'd give him a whole bunch of immunity. So
parliamentary privilege.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, right.
So I would have stopped so many issues happening. I'm glad that he's free now.
Yeah.
But what I learned through that...
How long was it? How long was he locked up for? Not locked up. Trapped in an embassy.
Trapped over 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Far out.
Yeah, it was pretty messed up.
Mm.
Well, between embassy and...
Yeah, wherever he was.
Yeah, the prison. But what I learned from that was that while single-issue parties will be very good on that particular topic, what they lack is a broad philosophy base that you can tell how they go. So whether it's this minor party, that minor party... They might be good on that particular topic.
Yep.
But at a minor thought bubble, you can't pick where they're going to sit on tax, on foreign affairs, on families, on business, on industrial relations.
Yeah.
You've always got to figure out where that is. Whereas what I found with libertarianism, we've got a set of guiding principles.
Yep.
Those principles form our policies. And if anyone, whether they're a socialist, communist, or statist of any measure, if they know our principles, they would probably be able to develop our policy for that particular topic, which means that it gives the voters a huge degree of certainty that if we get elected, I'll reframe that, when we get elected, they know with certainty where we are going to sit on just about any issue, even if we don't have a formally developed policy.
Yep.
They'll be able to figure out where we stand on that topic.
Gotcha. Okay. And so your key policy areas that you're passionate about, obviously transparency. What else is a priority for you?
Well, for me personally, it's the family. So the family unit is the first introduction that most people have to a governance structure.
Yeah.
You got your parents, you got the kids.
You got to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you get the boot, but hopefully you don't get the boot.
Yeah, correct.
So there you've got a whole range of security issues, education, health, infrastructure maintenance.
Finances.
Yep. And if that's balanced to the benefit of everyone in that family, everyone's happy.
It works.
The problem comes is when a minority are ignored and the family goes down a particular path, that there's a little bit of friction. What we've seen in recent years is that government will interfere with the education process, health, all the rest. So kids are going off doing things without the consent of the parents.
Yep.
And that is causing a rift in so many areas. And that's where libertarians want to support the family to have choice of education, choice of health. And
do you have an example of those situations?
You can just look at the woke agenda in education. You can look at the lack of parental consent with regards to gender processes.
Yep.
And
when you say woke agenda, what do you define that as?
It's along the... So I think it comes from a place of excellent intent where they want to address social injustice, race issues, gender, disability.
Yep.
The only problem is that I've never seen anyone who would call themselves supportive of the woke agenda, interested in veteran disabilities, PTSD, the like.
Yeah.
Road trauma, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's this very niche focus. And while if those issues were addressed, it'd be, as long as it supports the voluntary interaction between consenting adults, would be good. What it fails to lack is the question of at what cost.
Yeah.
So if we focus all our energy on that, what happens to the roads? What happens to the hospitals? What happens to...
It comes back to that single issue party. You don't know where exactly it's all going to sit elsewhere when it comes to other policy decisions.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that there's been cases where the woke agenda has affected the other things in a negative way? Do you have examples that you can think of now?
If you look at drag story time in schools, things like that. If a parent wants to take their child to a venue where they do drag story time, no issues. I think it's not a good idea. But as a libertarian, I support people living their lives in ways that I don't particularly agree with.
Yeah. It's the old...
Where when it comes to schools,
if
it's done subvertly, where the teachers think they're doing a good thing, it doesn't matter how good it is. You can be giving them healthy food or taking them on holidays to Bali or whatever.
Yep.
But the reality is that if it's done without consent, that's a major issue.
It's the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so your issue isn't necessarily with the event itself. Obviously, personally, you may not agree with them.
Yeah.
But your issue is more around the lack of consultation.
Yeah,
okay.
Consultation and consent. So the guiding force for me, the way I make decisions, is based on the voluntary interaction between consenting adults.
Yep.
That means that the children are the responsibility of the parent.
Yep.
But that voluntary consent must be achieved in order for anything to happen. And so that's where I think taxes are theft and a whole range of other things that we are forced into. Like you look at car registrations these days, they're getting near $1,000. Half of that's to TAC.
Well,
big chunk of that is to marketing.
Yeah, correct.
And you're just like, what on earth?
Yeah, it's nuts. I had to pay for, I think it was my driver's license or my passport, and I was looking at the prices, and I'm like, that's only for 3 years. That's not permanent. That's like I've got to pay that every 3 years. That was
well, I think Australian passports are some of the most expensive in the world.
The most expensive in the world.
Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, you do get a lot of access for passports. As passports go, Australia is one of the better ones. I think we're only beaten by Singapore and a couple of other places where there's a little bit more access, but still their passports are much cheaper than ours. Why is that? Like, and Switzerland is like half our price or something, but they've got, this really cool glow in the dark thing that they have. So you put it under a black light and it shows like the topographical maps of Switzerland and stuff.
Wow.
Like, it's really cool. And it's half the cost of ours.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't compute for me.
Yeah, well, that sort of benchmarking is something that most people, because of the cost of living, which is driven by a cost of government pressure.
Yes.
Most people don't have the time to do that sort of benchmarking as to how we are performing on a global scale.
And do you think that's because we're geographically removed and also somewhat culturally removed? We're fairly, we've got Australian culture, but we've got, obviously it's a multicultural society, but when it comes to what we hear about overseas, it comes through a very American lens, definitely. I find. Yeah. And do you think that sort of breeds that lack of awareness of, there's some European places that might do it a little bit better and a little bit cheaper?
I'd never considered it before, but I think you're on the money where, like in Europe, people moving country to country
all the time
more than what we would be moving state to state.
Yeah, definitely.
So they're getting exposure to all these different cultures, picking out the best of this and that.
Well, that's because it takes like half the time. But yes, I had one of my mates over from Scotland, and he said, "Yeah, it's crazy how I can drive for 6 hours, and I'd be, well and truly in mainland Europe, but I drive for 6 hours here, and I'm not even out of the state." And I'm like, "Yeah, that pretty much sums Australia up." So.
If you're driving from here to Mildura, you've got a long way to go.
It was 7-hour drive, and it's still in the same state. So further to that, do you think that there's what are the main programs you think that the government should be cutting? Because you're thinking that the cost of government crisis is what's causing inflation, which is causing a cost of living crisis. What are the main areas where you think that they can cut the fat? And
straight away, ABC.
Okay, cool.
Because when they were independent, I remember growing up watching ABC, and I didn't have a critical lens on at the time.
Yep.
But I'm pretty sure that it didn't have a heavily political bias.
Yep.
Where now ABC, the government of the day, rarely gets a scathing interview or anything like that.
Yep.
Because of who's paying the bills.
Yeah, correct.
We, the people, are paying the bills, but because of being funneled through the government,
then there's a certain level of being beholden to the government.
Yeah. And it's $1.1 billion that I think would be far better spent. Actually, if you look at the cost of Netflix as the cost of ABC, Netflix is cheaper.
Yes.
ABC is more expensive.
Yep.
But it's forced upon you.
And I guarantee more people watch Netflix.
Yeah.
So do you think that it would move to it should, whether it will or not, move to a subscription model where you
absolutely
willingly pay for it? So
because the whole thing is like I've been in council for over 4 years now. Whenever these projects or policies or any sort of idea pops up, the public servants will go, it is so valued by the community, we have to do it.
Absolutely, we should fund that.
But my retort to that is that if it is valued, people will voluntarily pay for it. And when government inserts itself into particular areas, it reduces the capability of the private sector to compete in that space.
Yes, because it becomes the standard.
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously,
and it's a false economy. So because governments forcibly take money off people, they've got this war chest that if I was Joe Bloggs starting up a competing business, I could not raise the capital to fight against that. And often there'll be regulatory capture as well.
Of course.
That if I want to open a business in this space, I need to get this license, that insurance, done that course. So it basically means that if you want to enter...
The barrier of entry is a lot higher.
Let's say I want to open a bank.
Okay.
Can I just go lease a property and start giving out loans?
I'd say not. Hey, you could start first with a building society and, have the membership of the building society, come up with the cash and then eventually build yourself into something. But I'll continue with your analogy.
Yeah, well, there's a whole range of things. So fortunately, I'm not going to specify what I've done in the past because I don't want regulations to be put on top of it. But I've operated in spaces that have a low level of regulation.
Yeah.
I will say that skydiving is not one of those areas.
No.
And what that does is it removes people that would have been excellent in the space.
Yep.
But because of the headache of the bureaucracy, the paperwork, all the rest, you get a lot of people not operating in that space. One of the reasons why I stopped being a truck driver is because we had these logbooks, little lines to indicate the amount of time that you've been driving.
Yep.
If you drew one of those lines 3 millimeters out of place, you could get a fine that would mean your whole day's pay is gone.
Oh. Yeah, right.
So if you just look at that element, what's the incentive to work?
Of course.
On top of the huge income taxes and all the rest.
Right. So on that, do you think, how would you respond to the people that come to you and say, well, there's certain regulations that are making sure that people aren't taking advantage of the system or, keeping us safe? In the case of skydiving, obviously a lot of regulations around that are there to protect the people participating, both the people who are providing the service and who are participating in it.
Yeah.
What is your
I'll give you
response?
a real world example of that.
Okay.
Doesn't happen in Australia, but happens in the US.
Yep.
There's a venue that is a skydive center.
Yep.
They're not part of the system.
What do you mean by that?
So in terms of regulatory system and all of that,
Yep.
they have fatalities. People keep going there. From my understanding, they operate at a cheaper level than others.
Okay.
And people are afforded the choice as to whether they want to engage in the heavily regulated industry or go to one that isn't. And for the most part, the unregulated one, they operate fine.
Yeah.
But there is that risk.
Yeah.
Australia is heavily regulated.
Yes.
I've got many friends that have died through skydiving, and it doesn't matter how heavily you regulate something, whether it's driving cars, trucks, motorcycles, all the rest. Humans are humans.
Yeah.
We make mistakes.
Yes.
And I think that if you take the regulations away, that increases the incentive for individuals to do their own due diligence. And then because individuals are more critical of how they're interacting with the business or other people, whatever,
Yep.
they'll take that responsibility and deliver far better outcomes to themselves than relying on X, Y, Z rules
Okay.
to make things safe for them.
Do you think that there's a place for some regulation, though? I mean, I'll use a real world example. My brother decided on a whim to go throw himself out of a plane. He's alive, thankfully. He's all good. I still think that he's missing a few brain cells, but I won't even start on you. I just have this abject fear of heights, and as soon as the plane goes up a little bit, I'm like, nah, we're good. So, but he decided on a whim to throw himself out of a plane. He Googled it, first thing that came up.
Yeah.
He was confident that obviously because there's that level of regulation in Australia that he'd be safe.
Yeah. And that is...
He's crazy, but...
It's a fair assumption because Australian skydiving is very, very, very safe. Far safer than driving a car.
Yes. And so would you concede that there's a confidence in knowing that because the space is regulated, or do you think that there's not really that much of a difference in the quality skydivers overseas, like, these unregulated places where you can go go, but the more expensive ones, you pay for that extra safety. Do you think that there's a massive difference between the two, or is it a little bit?
Depends if you compare the worst example in a regulated industry with the best example in the unregulated industry. There's going to be disparities.
Apples and
if you swap them around, I think there's going to be pros and cons to each, and I think individuals should be afforded the choice to function whichever environment that they want.
Yep.
What I will say is that there is some benefit to uniformity. Doesn't necessarily need to be regulation, but when it comes to international aviation, having holding patterns and landing systems so that you're not getting air-to-air crashes is a very sound example.
Yeah, 100%. And they're all operating independently of each other. There's no overarching regulation, but they're all...
Oh, no, they do have overarching regulation.
Okay, right, yeah, but it's not to the same extent.
Yes.
Okay, so you touched on it a little bit before, but you're passionate about mental health.
Yes.
You're into the mental health space.
Yep.
What's your experience with mental health issues?
So I've attempted suicide as a result of some stresses that I was experiencing.
Yep.
Fortunately failed.
Yep.
But having experienced that, I now understand how I got to it and what some of the indicators are for when I'm heading there. So throughout life, everyone goes ups and downs.
Yes.
And it's fine to be in a bit of a downer, just knowing that it's going to be temporary. And as long as you take ownership and can improve on things, you'll get back on the up. But the issue with the suicide experience I had was that it got dark.
Yeah.
In a room, it was all closing in on me. All the doors were closed, windows were closed. They were unlocked.
Yeah.
I didn't know this. But we can only take on so much stress. My ability to take on stress now is far greater than it was in 2014.
Yep.
But there's so much to a lot of it's education, understanding human psychology, understanding what stresses us out, understanding how we interact with each other. And from what I experienced throughout the lockdown periods is that I had a friend that committed suicide in Adelaide.
Yep.
And they did not have anywhere near the stress. But I think anyone who had a high degree of compassion from outside of Victoria, witnessing what was happening inside Victoria, would have had a massive blow. And those of us that live through it likely know someone who's got experience of someone who either attempted or successfully participated in suicide action throughout those lockdown periods. Because there were kids and all the rest.
Yeah.
And that's why too much government control is insane, because it doesn't consider the needs of the individual.
Crushes little go.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why we need to empower people. Like, I want to empower people to know that they don't have to vote for a major party until the end. Like, if they want to vote minor party that they prefer, minor party that they don't prefer, and then the majors, that's a great way for the individual voter to take back power to elect candidates that more represent them than the major legacy parties.
Yeah, 100%. So with the mental health space, do you think that there's obviously, particularly among men, there is an epidemic in this country where men are taking their lives at a increasing rate? What do you think can be done? Is it something that the individual, checking in on your mates, that's the Are You Okay Day, that sort of stuff?
I don't like the Are You Okay Day. It should be Are You Okay every single day of the year.
Of course, yes.
One is better than none.
Yep.
But the major issue there is, what if they say, no, I'm not okay? Is the individual empowered?
Do they know what to say?
Yeah.
Where would you say that those resources would be? Do you think that the resources are there for people to know what to say and how to support their friends?
Oh, the Are You Okay Day website has some guides on to what to do for that.
Yep.
But that's symptom management.
Yeah.
I'm big on addressing causal factors. So whether it's a cut on your arm, whether it's policy at a federal level that impacts the way you and I engage with each other.
Yeah.
Rather than looking at the symptom, I want to look at the cause. Yeah. So, Are You Okay Day? Band-Aid. Happy days. Yeah. But I want to go deep down and do the stitching to address it at its core.
At its core. Yeah. There's a high number of, I can't remember the polling, but it was like 80% of federal electorates have a majority of households reporting financial stress. Do you think financial stress is a major cause?
I don't know, because I haven't gone and spoken to all.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've spoken to everyone.
I know that whether it's financial stress, concern about work, concern about children's education, it all forms part of it. And what I have learned, being in the political space for a while now, is that everyone is going through crap.
Yeah.
You, me, everyone listening is going through crap. It's just the type and depth is different.
Yep.
And if you ask the question why 3, 4, 5 times, you'll eventually get to a point where you go, this is why we're doing it. Yeah. It's because of this law or that tax or whatnot. And then if you can address that, you'll then fix so many issues.
Yeah.
Because rather than putting Band-Aids on everything, it's like this cheaper childcare plan that Labor rolled out at last federal election.
Yep.
It costs you, me, and everyone in Australia, man, woman, and child, $2,000 per year to fund that. Whether you've got kids or not,
right,
you are funding that cheaper childcare program.
Okay.
If you're a 5-year-old that doesn't go to childcare, you're funding that. And it's all of these little issues that build up into the net debt that the country has.
Yeah.
That's liable for every single one of us to be.
Yeah, of course. That'd be when the 5-year-old pays the dicks when they've grown up.
When inflation's continued and then they need to make $500,000 to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah. So do you think Australia's heading towards hyperinflation?
It's got the framework for it.
Okay.
We've got the base.
Yeah.
Libertarians want to strike that down.
Yeah.
Because both major parties both have a policy where they'll support 2 to 3% inflation.
Yeah.
But what that 2 to 3% inflation is actually the government going to grandma, taking $2 or $3 out of her $100 kitty under her bed every single year, which is going to whittle it away
slowly,
not too long at all.
as opposed to, in the space of a few years. Where does the Libertarian Party policy differentiate from the majors when it comes to that monetary space?
Oh, we got a massive sound money policy that it's all around reducing inflation. So whether it's money supply, government debt, taxation, all of these inputs need to be reduced so that inflation can get back under control.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, they talk about inflation's being reduced.
Is that
so? We've gone through. Let's say each percent of inflation is a punch in the face.
Yeah.
For years, we've been getting 2 to 3 punches in the face.
Okay. Yeah.
Throughout the last few years, it got up to
6.
Realistically, closer to 10.
Yeah. Right.
And then it's gone back to 2 or 3. Should we be thankful that we're still getting 2 to 3 punches in the face a year?
Right. Okay.
Or should we be getting no punches in the face every year?
Well, yeah, fair. I'm just behind camera just getting whacked.
Well, you are by the government every single year.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. So you mentioned a bit before about your time in local government. How's that been? Obviously, you're a second term councillor?
Surf Coast, yeah.
Yep.
It was pretty disgusting. I can see that most people involved have a good intent.
Yep.
But they misunderstand how the forceful taking of ratepayers' money, it just is not sound.
Yeah.
It's not just. And Milton Friedman described spending money in one of 4 ways.
Mm-hmm.
Your money or someone else's money on yourself or on others.
Yeah.
When it's your money spent on yourself, you both seek to spend the least but get the greatest value.
Sure.
When it's someone else's money on someone else, who cares how much we spend? The value, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I experience that. You experience that. Everyone experiences that. Because if you go work for $25 an hour, make $50, you'll stretch that.
Yeah.
If I walk up to you, hand you a pineapple, whoo, go buy a box of beer. Oh, no, you can't buy a box of beer because it's too much tax.
Yeah, 100%.
But you used to be able to. You'll spend it flippantly.
Okay.
Some people, I think, against the norm, they'll be able to squirrel it away.
Sure.
But for most people, human instinct, whoopee, let's go spend it.
Yeah, I've got it, so I'll spend it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and just focusing in on local government, what has your experience been with dealing with other councillors? Obviously, you're the only out-and-out libertarian on your council.
I've got one other, Joel.
Okay.
He's finding his feet.
Yep.
But there's some that have libertarian leanings in some way.
Yep.
Because I'm a firm believer that everyone is libertarian in at least one or several ways.
Okay.
Because most people want the freedom to live their lives the way they choose.
They see fit. 100%.
It's just some of them try to use the government to impose that way on everyone else.
Right.
And that's what I've got a significant issue with.
Yeah. That's why you're there.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But on the whole, and this is a funny thing.
Yeah.
I'm the only candidate or politician, that's openly come out saying I don't particularly want to be involved.
Yeah, right.
Because my life has suffered massively, financially, emotionally, personally, on so many levels.
Yep.
It's also been very richly rewarding in a number of ways. But the negatives far outweigh the positives.
Yeah.
And like with what I'm doing with Corangamite,
so you're running in the upcoming federal election for the Libertarians.
Yes.
In the seat, currently held by Labor, Libby Coker.
Yeah.
So, and that's going to be announced shortly, or by the time this is released, it will have been announced.
Yes.
And what's your plan with that? What's the intent? Obviously, you're already involved with local government, and you've just said you don't want to be a part of it, which is fair. what's the goal with your Karangamite run?
Long term or short term?
Both.
Long term.
We've got time.
Yeah. Long term, create an environment where someone far better than me can come through and be the candidate.
Yep.
Someone with more time on their hands, more resources, more principles to fly the flag of liberty.
Yep.
But in the short term, build on the 2.5% that I gained at the last federal election.
Yep.
And continue to build the branch, the local members. So what we found is during the last federal election, the branch was quite a skeleton crew.
Yep.
But since that election, it really built it up, and now we're very well established in the region.
Awesome.
And it just creates a space where we can invite people to come socialise and have a chat, see what's important to them.
Yep.
And whether that increases to 2.6% or 10% or more or less, that's secondary. What I just want to do is create a community where people who dislike the direction that society is heading have a place to go, have a place where they can speak their mind.
Yep.
And then that way, I think in time, like what the Greens did with the seat of Melbourne, the federal seat of Melbourne, over a period of 20 years, they built that first preference vote up to 20%. 50%.
Yep.
So while I'd love that change to happen
immediately
this year, I know that's highly unlikely, but not impossible.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's got to do with education. And while government controls education and restricts or totally removes the education of civics and politics and economics from the syllabus, we are going to continue to struggle to get that cut through, because libertarianism is founded on a solid understanding of economics, how people interact, and what the trade-offs are for certain decisions.
And there's common misconceptions in political discourse around what libertarians stand for, I guess. Like there's a lot of, obviously there's the American definition of libertarianism and the American Party, and, people make jokes about how, they stand for, personally owned nuclear weapons, legalization of all drugs and all that sort of stuff. And so I guess there's a lack of understanding. How do you think that you and the Libertarian Party more broadly should and could go about promoting themselves to ensure, because people that I speak to in town, they're like, oh, love the policy ideas, have never heard of them.
Yes.
Obviously it's a small party, it's a minor party, but what's the strategy to get more well-known and get people an understanding and a fair understanding of the policy positions of the Libertarians?
Continuing to run candidates in elections. Because the reality is most people don't pay attention to politics until the election. And if we were running...
Sometimes even when they're just ticking the box. Well, not ticking. Anthony Green will get annoyed at me. Not ticking. You number the boxes. Yes, just making that clear. Yes.
Number all the boxes.
Number all the boxes.
Yes. It's just...
It's just a long slog of get candidates out there, get the branding known, and it's a new rebrand recently with the new Libertarian Party, because it was the Lib Dems previously. So it's just a matter
in
of...
the height of lockdowns, the federal Liberal government, during the middle of lockdowns, chose to make the name Liberal illegal in other parties' names, which forced us into the change.
Right.
I'm quite happy with the change. But it's quite funny that the Liberal Party would make such a liberal law during the heart of lockdowns.
Right. So it's just a matter of continuing to brand yourself and push the values out there.
And educate the community when they're open to it. So if I was walking around with our policy book and knocking on doors in between elections, most people would be, I'm too busy, don't want to know. Whereas when we come up to elections, people are a little bit more open to it. And that's the best time to introduce that education.
100%. Awesome. Okay, cool. And does the Libertarian Party stand for the legalization of all drugs?
Well, our policy at the moment is focused heavily on cannabis. We'll see how that goes. There's legalized cannabis politicians around Australia,
Yes.
and there's very little movement on it. So I'm not sure if we can leave it to the legalised cannabis party to actually make it happen.
Sure.
But legalising cannabis is a strong part of the Libertarian platform and has been for decades.
Yes.
So it's not like we are definitely not a populist movement. We are for pragmatic change to legislation that empowers individuals to live their lives the way they see fit. And the reality is that cannabinoids were used in medicine hundreds of years ago, and they're not now.
Right.
So I think if something was working, we should be able to bring it back.
Fair enough.
And if people want to use it as pain relief or any other way, it doesn't matter whether you, me, or others want that. If someone else wants to be able to do it, they should be able to.
Well, particularly in the medical space, I think if there's any room for, pain relief, or there was some research done over in the States around the effect that medicinal marijuana had on Parkinson's patients, and that was, I believe, it was very promising, but I don't remember the stats. But it was, if there's any way that can be used as a positive impact on people's lives, then surely you've got to be supportive of that research at least being done.
Absolutely.
100%.
And you touch on medical freedom, which is another one. So what we found through lockdowns and mandates is that APRA had massive control over individual doctors that I think were forced into a position that they were not able to give the advice that they might have otherwise, and improving medical freedom so that the relationship between doctors and their patients can be improved can only help society.
Yeah. 100%. Okay, cool. Covered a lot of ground here. There's a lot to think about. All right, I'm going to do now a little quick fire, just questions. It's just going to be a couple of words max. We're going to go all sorts of different places, just as a bit of fun before we finish up.
Yeah.
So, beer, wine, or spirits?
Yes.
Okay, so you're a drinker.
Each has its place.
Yes.
Well, I'll put that into context where I might go weeks or months without a drink.
Yep.
I might go a few drinks that night or this night, and I have a good night another time. Each has their place. So, like, if I've been working out in the sun all day, cold beer in the day, perfect.
Awesome.
If I've just been socialising, maybe a scotch.
Yeah.
If I'm out at a fancy dinner, maybe a wine.
Maybe something nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Ideal holiday.
What's a holiday?
I thought you might say that. But is it hotel? Is it camping? Is it overseas? What's your ideal getaway? Or is it just
my last holiday was when I was living in suburbia.
Yep.
And that was at a beachside hotel.
Yep.
Now I live at the beachside, so maybe we'll say something inland. I'll go
big old back to Melbourne for a holiday. Love that. Okay, favourite Australian Prime Minister?
Robert Menzies. Well, probably Robert Menzies. Bob Hawke, not for policies, but for the way he conducted himself.
Just being an iconic Australian.
Except for the infidelity.
Okay, right. Segue, favourite US president? No.
JFK, hands down.
Yeah, without the infidelity, allegedly.
Yes.
Donald Trump, 3 words or less. What are your thoughts?
Crazy but needed.
Okay, cool. And I forgot the last question.
Make it
It's always very good. I'll make it up. Favorite thing about Australia?
Laid back. I was going to say society, but it really has changed over recent years.
Yeah.
Gone are the days of Crocodile Dundee, larrikinism.
Yeah.
Being able to say what you want.
I think in politics you're sort of exposed to such varying ideologies that, there is still that Australian larrikin out there. I know a few of them. They're they're still there, but it's just that they're not involved in politics.
Yeah.
They're too busy. She'll be right. They're out there, living their lives and that sort of thing. But yeah, definitely see your point. There has been a significant change.
Yeah.
Where are people best to find you and connect with you online?
I'm on X, Facebook, Instagram,
And what's your handle?
LinkedIn. Different handles, but if you search Paul Barker Torquay
Yep. Awesome.
or Paul Barker Libertarian, it'll pop up.
And on X, it's at Paul Barker.
At
so.
Paul_Barker.
Yep. Cool.
Instagram and Facebook, Paul Barker Libertarian.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, that sounds like we'll finish it up there. Thank you so much for doing this. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, James.
Great to chat to you. Everyone that's listening, please do connect with Paul on the socials and reach out if you've got any questions about libertarianism more broadly, what he's doing in his space in local council or running for office. If you want to hand out how to vote flyers or anything for him, please feel free to reach out. Thank you very much again. Appreciate you. And we'll see you all next time.
Thanks for having me, James.
Awesome. Thanks. See you, everyone.
Bye.
Authorised by J. Bennett Hullen for the JBH Show, Geelong.